Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar. I'm your host, CEO and founder of Continental Aspire Soccer, Nick Donnelly, and I'm just obviously looking forward to having you on here. If you guys have any questions, keep up to date with all of our content across all of our socials, just across LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, for any questions that you may have. And like I say, we're obviously going to dive in. This is the second webinar, like I say, this is where we're actually going to discuss why clubs on the continent have higher player requirements than, for example, if you're coming from like the UK. And I'll kind of just explain the reasons for that. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions just in this area. So if you, like I said, if you have any questions at any point, don't hesitate to you can obviously engage on the social and also get in touch with us via email. Or if you just want to go register and you've seen the first webinar, just head on over to our website. You can register, and hopefully this webinar finds you. You can just watch in the comfort of your own home with your son. And thank you for joining us and taking the time out to engage with us. So we're very appreciative of that. So we're just going to talk about what clubs in the continent have higher player requirements, and it's funny when I get this question as to why, and people even in England, even professional scouts I've spoken to from clubs like Manchester United to obviously to clubs like Arsenal, Chelsea, Celtic and Rangers, really big clubs, and I always say to them, I kind of went to the continent about way back around, like I say, was around 2010, because I kind of became disillusioned. Obviously, I'd come through the system, obviously I'd come all the way through. I'm the grandson. My grandfather, he was a player. He played for Scotland at international level. He was very successful as a professional player in my native Northern Ireland. Like I say, he had obviously come to Glasgow Celtic before this would have been just after the First World War, and obviously myself and kind of where I've actually come from. Obviously, I went through this journey myself, and so coming through this journey, I think is definitely it's definitely an interesting one. So whenever you're looking, especially for non-EU players, the continent is the best place for you to come. In England, it's very difficult for kids to obviously come in visa wise, restrictions wise. They just don't, unless you've got an EU passport, they will not consider you. Or now the new system, which we're obviously going to talk about down the road, is going to be the Brexit and that new system. So I've actually begun to fully understand how that works. So this video is for you 100%. So if you're coming from North America, if you're coming from Canada, you're coming from Asia, India, any of these countries, Schengen countries, this is definitely a good webinar for you. And I think the difference of player recruitment for kind of pre-academy, and that obviously, like I say, when you're 5 to 11, you're better staying in your own country at that age. You can still come to kind of the Continental Aspire Soccer talent identification stuff that we do. But we put it on, and it's a great learning curve for a parent, especially if the parent and the child are going to go through it together. That's definitely very good. Now, player recruitment, so where we kind of have operational bases within the UK, and then which pretty much be London, and then in North America, Florida. But obviously, since we're in because of the restrictions, that's not happening just at the minute. But typically, we literally will start to look at kids from, like I say, like that age. So from I would say around the 9-10 kind of age range, and from there, then of course that's to get you prepared to go into the youth development phase at, for example, 12 and 16. So whenever you'd typically be leaving CAS, you'd be going to like an under 17. That's kind of what you'd be doing, and then they do U19 and then reserves. That's typically how they do it there on the continent. So one of the biggest things is, and then of course the professional development phase, which is 17 to 23. So that's obviously a major, and what they do in each phase is very, very different. Like I say, the youth development phase is where a kid should have a very good understanding of how to play football, at that age. So that's definitely preparing them for more competitive football. You know what I mean? So that they can obviously progress, like I say, to like the next level, in their development. But also, what's also important. So why is it important to enjoy your journey? Pretty much enjoy your journey in a football club. So I think when you're obviously going through that journey, there's loads of great people you'll meet. I think some of the best people I've met have actually been in football, and it kind of becomes a way of life. And I think you absolutely have to love it, to stay the course. Because I also think in terms of kids have different personalities. They're very, very different as people. So everybody's experience is obviously going to vary, dependent upon what their expectations are, what kind of their upbringing has, but also the type of coaching they've received as well. That's also taken into consideration. That's one of the things we can identify, what type of coaching a kid has had. By the time he comes to a CAS talent identification camp, we can actually then see where he is, and what he's going to need, whether it be in the next 12 months, whether it be in the next 24 months, based upon his age. And I think as well, when you're coming through and you're aspiring to come through the CS player pathway, we kind of are looking at what a kid is going to need. You know what I mean? For him to get to where his goal is. And that's one of the things we always ask kids and we also ask parents, what is their goal? Because sometimes, it'll blow your mind. People actually don't know what their goal is. And sometimes they need a little bit of help with that. So I'm all for giving people help and giving them directive, but also giving them corrective in terms of how they can make sure the goal is good, but make sure, it's good to have ambition, but you also have to be, have that drive, but also you got to be realistic as well. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're technically not good with your right foot, you know what I mean, you're not going to be, thinking that you're going to be a Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi is going to be highly unlikely if you can't have that other side of the game that they would have had at their age. So that's definitely something, and we see loads of players. I mean, we've had. I mean, I remember I had a player. He was due to go to Ajax. Manchester United wanted by everybody. And I remember, and I said to him, because I knew Sven Goran Eriksson, who's Leicester. This kid was only 18. Listen, let's go to. Have you gone to Leicester City? See how you. He's a kid from California, from Ensenada, California. Brought him there. He done phenomenally well, and then boom, he was just scouted from the get go. He done 3 trainings. Then they want to offer him a contract. Now that is a very rare occurrence. I've very rarely seen that happen here or there, but it's very, very rare. But he was an extremely high level player. He was in the top 50, 100 players in the United States at his time under 16, the under 18. So he was doing very, very good, So that's definitely important for people to understand. So we want to make sure you're prepared for that journey. So whenever you're going on trial, you've got to compete against the best players in your position in continental Europe. So, for example, German Bundesliga, they look at when they do a training session, they'll cover things like they'll cover the technical, the tactical, and the physical all in one session. So they do everything, so they can see the whole. They can see the whole within a 2 hour session. So it's important to realize that the game there is quite quick. It's quite dynamic. So depending on the player's skill set, we can know what league he's going to work well and what club specifically he will work well in, because we get that data every single year. So we'll be able to help you kind of navigate, kind of going on the right path, because people need a lot of direction. You know what I mean? If they're not familiar with this and they haven't been down this road before. The next one is I mean, if you're going to compete against and I've had many, I mean, like I had a couple of players where, for example, I remember having 2 players that went to obviously FC Groningen, and whenever they went in, I remember he was from Northern Ireland, from my homeland, and basically I sent him into he went into FC Groningen, the same club for example, Ian Robin came through, Luis Suarez. You know what I mean? This is kind of where they really got their big break. And then obviously he progressed and they went on to go on and do big things, win Champions Leagues, appear at numerous World Cups for their countries, respectively. And so this kid, he was going there, and very proven. You know, he'd scored 11, he'd scored 12 goals and 13 internationals as an under-17 striker for Northern Ireland. So one of the things that I said to him was, I said, listen, I said, you're going to go to a club, you've got to apply yourself, because you're going to compete against a lot of good players. And he had been to Man City, he'd been to Aston Villa, he'd been to quite a few clubs in England. So I reckon, I said, come to the Continent. He does really, really good. But the problem that he had was he didn't have the what would be expected of him. He couldn't really wrap his head around. And then he was with another player. His name was Aiden Rustic. You can look him up. Aiden is now, and he was rooming with Aiden, right? And you could see, if you met Aiden, you'd know he had his confidence was unbelievable. And he's actually teamed up with his ex-Groningen teammate. He just moved to Eintracht Frankfurt, and that's the next stage in his development. And he's only like 24, almost 25. And so he's obviously doing there. He's doing decently. He's doing decently okay. Do you know what I mean? And so he's now on that next road to his journey. And he said to me, he had a goal of making sure he'd be in the Premier League by the time he was 27. So he set himself a really good goal. I just want to let you guys know that, because I think it's really helpful to let you know kind of what you can actually be thinking. But the problem was this other player, who I'm obviously not going to name. Now he didn't quite make it. He didn't quite make it, but it was because of all the other factors. He could wrap his head around. He had the technical, he had the tap, but he didn't have the personality that was required. And that's why he'll never make it in professional football, because personality drives everything else. I'm a firm believer in that. Even when I used to work with Manchester United, I could tell the DNA of a Manchester United player and what he needs to have. And so that's definitely important for you as a parent to obviously think of, and pretty much when you're progressing on that journey. And so obviously to be the best player in your position, right? And like I say, it depending on where your level is, doesn't mean you'll be at the same level forever, right? You will progress. So whenever we're actually looking at how the Continent stands out on the player philosophy side. So if you're playing in Holland, it's extremely technical. So you've got to be extremely good with the ball. You've got to be able to, you know what I mean, they want you to develop and to be able to use both feet, and you've got to be a part. If you're going to a club like Ajax, you got to fit within the Johan Cruyff philosophy, which is obviously what people know as tiki-taka or total football. So, which is obviously we actually have some documents where we can actually explain to people if they want to understand that. And I actually have written a paper on the total football philosophy, and I was mentored by obviously a lot of big Dutch coaches. So I've learned a lot of those things on that journey. So that'll actually be included in the online football course, which you'll get access to once you register. It'll kind of go into detail about what that is. But then obviously the Belgian football is really evolving at the minute. They're doing quite well in European competition. You look at Royal Antwerp. They're a club that was they were in the third division like over 6-7 years ago. In Belgium now they're competing at the Europa League, and they're in second place in the Belgian Pro League. So these are clubs that are evolving, and they're evolving very, 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 very quickly. So they want to make sure that they get kids into their academy setup as soon as they can. But what they want to do is they want to bring them in and make sure they understand the fundamental. That means obviously what we do with a lot of clubs, we'll bring them into tournaments to see how they do, see how they interact. But that's typically the kids that come through the CS player pathway. We find those are the kids that have been the most successful because we've had more time with them. And like I say, a lot of the coach we have, they've won trophies at the very top level, and they also understand the bottom level as well, which I think definitely is what separates Continental Aspire Soccer from anyone else. And so we also have players that have played on the continent, but also have played in British football as well. But like I say, in terms of looking at that, so what type of philosophy they play at in Germany, and being able to compete, because everybody that is there, and I would say academy football is probably the toughest, because everybody wants to get to the first team. That's everybody's goal when they're there. So you're going to face a lot of competition, and also you might have two players in front of you. So if there are two players in front of you, common sense will tell you, you got to work out very, very hard to be at that level. You need to practice more than maybe another player is. And I would say the best players practice the most. That's you know what I mean. That's definitely true. Practice makes perfect. I totally believe that. You know what I mean. So that's definitely so, and that's also in the number why a lot of kids don't make it, because they don't want to do those things. They just don't. And I mean, I remember speaking to a good friend of mine, and I remember he was when he was explaining to me that I think it was John O'Shea, he's a defender, and his defender was marking Ronaldo before Manchester United signed him. And one of the things that he said to him was, he said, all the scholars, the young kids who just first started at United, and they saw Cristiano Ronaldo in the gym at the Carrington, Manchester United's training ground, training, and they thought, oh, look at him, you know what I mean? And they were laughing at him. Not every single one of those players was released, because that's why Ronaldo's got the level he is practice, because of the sacrifice that. But the thing is, he wants it, but not everybody will want to be on that level, and very few, because you only have one Cristiano Ronaldo, and you'll only ever have one Messi. So you also need to set your expectations, but also to do the best that you can do once you get to that level. And it's up to you what you do with that opportunity when you get it. Do you know what I mean? So that's also part of it. So whenever we look at what you're going to be looking at, we want to make sure we put you in a position where you are going to be successful. And like I say, we do collect that. We do look at that every single year. So why Continental Aspire Soccer, we base our recruitment decisions on data. So the data that the clubs give us. So that's stuff that we can see that is not in the public domain. We don't just invite a bunch of scouts in. And that's what you'll see a lot of organizations do. They'll bring a lot of scouts there, and they'll just, hopefully something happens and they bring a kid in. And I don't think recruitment works like that. I've never seen recruitment be successful on that level at all. So I think it's better when a kid's kind of come to a proven system, where there's an elite level understanding. And so I think that's the thing. I think there's a lot of kids all over the world that have that. That's a disadvantage for them, because they don't have somebody that really knows, somebody that's been there, somebody that really knows it back to front. So this is where we really want to come in and help you and make sure that you excel, and you get to the goal that you really desire. You know what I mean? But also where we can also give you feedback if you're not at that level and what you're going to have to do to be at that level. But I also think that's very, very helpful. So that's why coming on the webinar, but also coming onto our online football training course is actually going to help you to do that. So if you don't, you can still go and register for that. You don't need to attend all the webinars, but I think they're very helpful, and I think it'll be important for every player coming on here what you're actually going to learn. You know what I mean? And also any questions you might have in regards to this. So just keep your eyes peeled. So like I say, we do check on data from clubs that we speak to, that work on partners with us. They like working with us because they know that we do things correctly, that we train correctly. And that's kind of our USP. We also know the kids are going to make it and the kids that don't, and also our software is actually being utilized in professional clubs right now, and it's software that we actually will be doing a session on the online football training to give you kind of an understanding of what to expect. Then also in terms of success stories, I mean, like I've even mentioned, so in terms of players that have obviously went on to actually be successful. So I mean, I look at, for example, obviously at Ida Rostic, you know what I mean? I look at many other players who had, they obviously went on to play at Tottenham. They've went on to play at a lot of big clubs over the years. You know what I mean? Obviously lads from all of, mainly in the London area. That obviously have obviously went abroad. Obviously we've had lads like Jordan Thompson. Obviously he was offered a contract, came to our situation. He obviously ended up choosing to move on to. He ended up going to. He went back to Glasgow Rangers, but he had a chance to sign for Willem II. So players like that. Then of course, if you go on to that, Gabon. Obviously you look at, for example. Gabon, he's obviously went on to play for Cardiff City. He's on loan at the minute at Hull City. Then, of course, if you're looking at players, as we kind of go, obviously Carlton Vicento, he obviously was at Ayton Den Haag originally. He's now playing in the second division, of Dutch division. And then, of course, we also if you obviously look at players, obviously they obviously went to Feyenoord, players that obviously have been at Ajax. So there's quite a number of players obviously working with Manchester United. There's a number of those players have went on to do quite well. The ones that didn't stay on at Manchester United ended up moving on elsewhere, because obviously to be at Man United you've got to be pretty exceptional. And then, of course, in terms of if you're obviously looking at a lot of the other elite clubs kind of on the continent. So, for example, obviously players that obviously went on to play for like Royal Antwerp. Players we've obviously got at Genk. Obviously, we got over 25 players in the Belgian Pro League right now. You know, I'm not going to name them all because I'll be here till next year. Because I'll tell you a story about each of them. And they're doing really, really good. Players obviously, for example, in French Ligue 1, Rami Benzemini, he came to us. He obviously has done very, very good. He's obviously progressed, and he's, like I say, he's obviously playing he's playing for Borussia Mönchengladbach in German Bundesliga. But he originally started, he actually started in Belgium. He came from a club called Pardo in Algeria, and then literally from there he obviously progressed. He's done very, very good. And like I say, he then went to Standard Liège. From Standard Liège, he obviously has progressed. Obviously spent some time in French Ligue 1, and then ultimately where he is now, he's obviously at Borussia Mönchengladbach. I think he can definitely progress. He can play quite a number of positions. Obviously, you look at Aydan Rustic. He's obviously at Eintracht Frankfurt, and a lot of these players. Obviously, there's so many I'm probably leaving out, but obviously players that we obviously had. She also had an academy in Colombia, and they actually did very, very well. And so there's quite a number of ones that obviously we work with. A lot of the ambassadors we have, like Romario, he's considered their best striker for Barcelona. He's a guy that we speak to quite regularly. He's a good ambassador for the CAS brand. Continental Aspire Soccer. So he comes and he works with us. So there's if you go on, you'll actually see some of our interviews. And what have you. One of our trainers who worked for Vasco da Gama, so he's brought two players like Philip Coutinho. So a lot of our trainers they're at the very, very top level. So we've obviously always done quite well in terms of players obviously being placed. But at the end of the day, what it's really about per year. Years differ depending on the level of player. Because then it's going to boil down to the player at the end of the day. We're the bridge to help them get to their destination. That's literally that's kind of our objective. So hopefully that's definitely. And then of course I look at Declan Dunn. You know, he was obviously offered a contract at Willem II, a number of clubs, but couldn't move due to obviously his club just wanted too much money for him. And that also happens where we obviously have kids come out, but then the clubs that they've been with, because obviously the club they've been with under FIFA regulation, they have to receive compensation. And so when they come to CAS, we can't really help them because their club wants too much money, and some of these clubs just will not pay that amount of money for that individual player. So there's obviously there's quite a number, and then of course remember we had a kid. He came out to a talent identification camp. He ended up at Barcelona. But then he didn't want to leave because of his GCSE results, because he's in school still, which is good. And then he ended up moving. To PSV instead. We kind of had him going to Willem II, which is very, very good club. Frankie de Jong started there. Virgil van Dijk started there. Jurgen Locadia. I mean, Sami Hyypiä. I mean, a lot of top players that played around the world. You wouldn't even know where they started. And Willem II is one of those clubs. So great club for developing young players. Great for moving them on. We have a great relationship with them. We like the relationship. And like I said, we always prepare players that will go in at that level. So hopefully that's hopefully inspired you enough about about actually coming out and actually seeing and learning more for yourself. But if you have any more questions, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments section below, and we'll do our very best to answer any questions you may have. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the third webinar. All right, thank you. Take care.